Now, today's lesson is going to be about periodic functions. Now, the main idea here is that a periodic function, it's a function that keeps repeating multiple times. It's a function that repeats multiple times. It's a function that's going to have a pattern, and that pattern is going to continue to repeat over and over again. Now, we have plenty of examples of periodic functions in trigonometry, which are sine, cosine, tangent, and other trig functions. We will see those functions again in the future. But now, before we start analyzing the functions, we got to see how they look like, or what's the main idea of them. So that's why we're going to start with periodic functions. Now, let's start with the following example. Here, we have an example, which, if you read it, says we need to create a sketch of the height of a Ferris wheel. We know that the height of the Ferris wheel is 200 feet, and it takes 10 minutes to complete a full cycle. Now, let's understand how the Ferris wheel works. You basically get into, the starting point, and you continue that Ferris wheel. So you're basically going to be going in a circle. You're going to be in a circle, and that completes one full cycle. Now, if you continue to be in this Ferris wheel, you're going to do that circle again and again. Now, notice if we're going to start looking at the height. Oops, forgot the T there. Now, notice that if we're going to be looking at the height, you basically start at the lowest point. You start at the lowest point of this Ferris wheel. Then you're going to keep increasing your height until you reach the highest point of that Ferris wheel. And then you're going to start decreasing again. And now you're going to make a full cycle. So again, if we're looking at the height of the Ferris wheel, you start at the lowest point. So that's usually when you get on a Ferris wheel. You start at the lowest point. You increase your height until you reach the highest point, and then you go down as well. Now, let's see. It's telling us that the height is 200 feet. So we know that this whole Ferris wheel is 200 feet. And it's also telling us that it takes 10 minutes to have a full cycle. So that means that if we start the Ferris wheel over here, and we know that it takes 10 minutes to make a full cycle, so that means that it takes us 5 minutes to at least reach the highest point. So it takes us 5 minutes to reach the highest point. So that means that from here to 1/4 of your cycle, it takes 2.5 minutes. So you here, 2.5 minutes. Another 2.5 minutes, you get your highest point. So that means that at third quartile, or the third quarter, you need to be on the Ferris wheel 7.5 minutes. Now, let's see if that makes, and again, it takes 10 minutes for you to come back to the point that you started. So let's see if it makes sense. It takes 10 minutes to go into a full cycle. So that means that it takes 5 minutes to get into the highest point, and it takes only 5 minutes to go back. So this is how we can look at the time for the Ferris wheel. So now let's see, where are we standing in each of those points now? Because again, we want to recreate a graph over here where we can analyze the height. So now that we know the minutes for that Ferris wheel, we can actually create our graph. Now, the reason why I was looking at minutes is because usually when you create any kind of periodic function, your x-axis is going to represent time, and your y-axis is going to represent height. Okay, so let's see, where are we standing? So you started your Ferris wheel, which is here, the origin. Well, now, what's your height at 2.5 minutes? We know the whole Ferris wheel is 200. So that means right here, we're half of the height of the Ferris wheel. So that means that we are 100 feet. So at 2.5, we are at 100 feet. Where are we standing at 5 minutes? At 5 minutes, we reach the highest point, which is 200 feet. So at 5 minutes, remember x is my time frame. So at 5 minutes, we are at 200 feet. That means that at 7.5 minutes, notice that you start going down again. So you go down into what height? You go down to half of 200, which is 100. So at 2.5, we're back to 100. And exactly at 10 minutes, you go back to 0. So at 10 minutes, you go back to 0. Let's repeat that same process again. Now you went to a full cycle. Now let's repeat our cycle again. At 2.5 minutes, we're starting at 10. So 2.5 more minutes, we're going to be at 12.5. At 12.5, our height is going to be 100 again. So at 12.5, our height is going to be 100. We're standing here. Now we know that at exactly 15 minutes, our height is going to be 200. So 15 minutes, our height is 200. And now we're going to go down. So our time frame 17.5, we're going to be at 100 feet. So at 17.5, we're going to be at 100 feet. So that means that in 20 minutes, you're going to go back down. So 20 minutes, our height is 0. So notice the graph that we have created here. Let's connect the dots that we were looking at. So we're going to increase. Now you're going to decrease. And now you're going to increase. And now you're going to decrease. And these are at least the points that we have. Now, notice that here, this part is where you were increasing your height. So it's basically this section of the Ferris wheel. And at this section, that's where you were decreasing. So that means that you were at this section of the Ferris wheel. Again, you go full cycle and then you repeat the process. You increase again, which is basically this section of the graph. You reach the highest point, which is right here, and then you start to decrease again, which is this section of the graph. We don't really have to look at any other points because we know that this is an example of a periodic function. So that means that this same pattern, this curve shape, is going to repeat over and over again. Over and over again. So we know that if we want to continue this graph, it's going to create the whole U shape again. And again, and again. So this is a clear example of a periodic function because if we look at the height, you always go up to a high point and then you go down. And then you go up again and then you go down. Now here, it's an interest ticket. Now, in your own words, describe the concept of a periodic function. What is a periodic function? Write a small sentence, 1 or 2 sentences. Let me know, what do you know about a periodic function?